But let me do this dive into Georgia, because there is a lot of apprehension among Republicans right now about the state of Georgia. Republicans are super concerned about losing Georgia. If Republicans lose the Senate seats in Georgia, the Senate falls to Democratic hands. Kamala Harris would be the tiebreaker. Joe Manchin would be the most powerful man in Washington, the senator from West Virginia. It'd be a 50-50 Senate, and the whole world would go the way that Joe Manchin wanted it to go. Now, that being said, if the Republicans pick up one seat in the Senate, then suddenly Susan Collins is the most powerful person in Washington, because Washington would go whichever way Susan Collins wanted. If both seats go to the GOP, you've got a Susan Collins margin of error with the Republican majority. They can afford to lose Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski and still be fine. And they could probably lose them both and pick up a Manchin or a Sinema or Mark Kelly or somebody. But the Republicans need to win these seats. If Republicans don't internalize the November election loss as a stolen election, they probably can. There is a real fear, there is real concern among Republicans that the president bad-mouthing the elections and claiming that the Georgia race was stolen is going to cost them these seats. Now, most Republicans in Georgia understand the race wasn't stolen. But there is a small but very vocal minority in the state that is convinced it was stolen. Jeff Duncan, the lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia, was on CNN's Aaron Burnett show, and he was asked about this. Kudos to Jeff Duncan for taking this issue on, being a real leader on this, defending the election. But, so there was an interesting voice played at the beginning of the interview with Aaron Burnett.
There has been a lot of mixed messaging for the president on the issue of voting in your state, right? This weekend, Trump supporters in your state were asking the RNC why they should even bother voting. Eric Erickson, conservative talk show host, Georgia native, says, quote, we could be handing Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer control of the Senate by the Republican disarray. And he went on to say this.
The president's got a choice. He can either continue this nonsense, and it is nonsense, or he can accept defeat and try to save the Senate to save his legacy.
Lieutenant Governor, do you agree with Eric Erickson?
Well, I think the honest answer here is not a lot's changed in Georgia over the last few weeks. We are still in the process of finalizing every legal vote and making sure we follow the letter of the law. I do think the president and Republicans in general need to refine their approach to how we handle this post-election process. I think there's two parts that really are concerning to me. One is the short term in the Senate election and making sure we don't alienate any voters that we need to show up for Senator Loeffler and Senator Perdue. And I think secondly, we run the risk of alienating voters longer term. As we talked about last week, GOP 2.0, what do we do to improve from this position? How do we play on the fact that President Trump validated for us that an outsider can make a difference in D.C.?
That was Jeff Duncan and me on CNN playing a clip from this here radio program. It's Hi CNN. Okay, but listen, good diplomatic answer from the lieutenant governor, who's out there along with the Secretary of State here in Georgia debunking a lot of the nonsense that's out there about the race being stolen. Here's the data you need to understand. Georgia was not stolen. It was white Republicans in the North Metro Atlanta area who don't like Donald Trump, who voted Republican everywhere, but they voted for Joe Biden because they don't think Joe Biden's going to screw up their 401k. That is the reality. You can choose to come up with a wackadoo conspiracy theory if you must, but it's a problem. I used to believe it was all the Democrats and the progressives who were in hyper-partisan bubbles. I've come to realize how many of my conservative friends are also in bubbles. Because I have for 4 years from people on the left heard them say they don't know anyone who voted for Trump. How could you vote for Trump? No one voted for Trump. It had to be the Russians. And now, from conservative friends of mine, from friends of mine here in Macon, I hear all the time, it had to be stolen because I don't know anyone who voted for Biden. Are you in that much of a bubble? You don't know anyone who voted for Joe Biden? I know people who voted for Donald Trump. You know, I gave the president a lot of money for his reelection campaign, and I supported him. When I point this stuff out, I get hate mail from people saying, you never liked him anyway. And I always look. I go to the disclosures and I look. And all the people who send me the hate mail saying that I was never Trump and didn't really support the president, they're not on his financial disclosure list. Their names are never there, and I always am. But I know people who voted for Joe Biden, too. And I used to appreciate the fact that my Republican friends, my conservative friends, they weren't in a bubble. They knew people on the other side. It's always the people on the other side. It's always the left who's more insulated and isolated than people on the right. People on the right are always better at articulating the arguments of people on the left because we tend to know people on the left more than people on the left know us. And yet now I'm surrounded by people who think the election had to be stolen because they don't know anyone who voted for Joe Biden. That's actually a pretty damning indictment on our society across the board, that you don't know anyone who doesn't share your political views. And because you don't know anyone who doesn't share your political views, you're more prone to conspiracy theorizing because of that level of societal alienation amongst everyone. That's a real problem for society as a whole. But the bottom line issue here, too, is there's no evidence to support a theft. If Republicans internalize a theft in Georgia, where you have a Republican governor, a Republican lieutenant governor, a Republican secretary of state, a Republican attorney general, a Republican speaker of the House, a Republican legislature, and the people say, well, if we got all of them, either they're in on, and I mean, this is the president's latest conspiracy theories, that Brian Kemp is in a conspiracy with Stacey Abrams to steal the election. Really? Really? Does anyone, I mean, that's just bat crap crazy. Does anyone really? I don't believe the president really believes that. I think this is all performance by the president. But there are people who will internalize it and they will say, nah, I'm not going to go vote. The Democrats are going to steal it anyway, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then when they don't go vote and the Democrats win, they're like, yep, see, they'd steal it anyway. No, they didn't steal it. They won it because your idiot self didn't go out and vote. Go vote. If Republicans vote, the numbers are on their side. Republicans, if you add up all the votes cast in congressional races in Georgia, the Republicans got 51%. In state House races, 53%. In state Senate races, 54%. In the Loeffler-Warnock race, where there were 21 candidates running, the right-of-center candidates got 53% of the vote. David Perdue got 49.8% of the vote. The Libertarian got almost 3% of the vote in Georgia. Had the Libertarian candidate not been there, David Perdue would have won without a runoff. Those votes wouldn't have gone to Jon Ossoff. Those are Second Amendment voters. The only one who lost was the president. And he lost, and you can see where he lost, because you can see voters who voted for Joe Biden and then voted for David Perdue. In South Georgia, it was black voters who voted for Joe Biden and then didn't even vote in the David Perdue-Ossoff race. That's why Jon Ossoff is not going to win this runoff, because black voters don't like Jon Ossoff. Nobody likes Jon Ossoff. They don't like Jon Ossoff doing his, I am the second coming of Barack Obama, and we will go. Nobody wants to listen to that crap for 6 years. Jon Ossoff isn't going to win. Warnock, you got to worry about. Warnock, you got to worry about Warnock. He's running his puppy commercial. People, oh, look at the puppy. Pay no attention to the communism coming out of his mouth. Look at the puppy. You got to worry about them. But, I mean, Loeffler should be able to beat him. Perdue should be able to beat Ossoff. Republicans just got to get in the game. There are problems out there. There are things we need to fix. There are things we need to work on. For example, there really needs to be a law that bans absentee ballot applications being mailed to you in Georgia. It should be verboten. It should be impermissible for people to flood you with absentee ballot applications. The number of people I know who got absentee ballot applications and think they got an absentee ballot. I've had people call this program and my other radio show constantly saying, I got 10 absentee ballots. No, you didn't. You got the applications. And anyone can send you an application, and I think we should probably ban that. If we can. I don't know legally if you can, but I would assume you could. Stop people from sending you applications. You yourself can go get it, but stop letting them do it for you. We need to clean up that process. There are processes that need to be fixed. But just because they're not great right now doesn't mean the race was stolen. Republicans have advantages. The only advantage Democrats have is the president going out there telling people it was stolen. And if people internalize that it was stolen, they're going to say, why bother voting? And in getting that why bother voting position, they're going to walk away. And that's going to be a problem. That will be problematic. The reality is, Georgia, Republicans can win this thing. They got the numbers. They've got a ground game that Democrats don't have. They've got the general numbers in all these other races. The Democrats have picked two candidates who are out of step with their own base in Georgia. See, the Democrats calculated we need good progressives to mobilize our voters. Actually, no, that was BS. What the Democrats actually needed is they needed more moderate people to go vote because Warnock and Ossoff are to the left of their base, and they're to the left of independent voters. Independent voters don't like Jon Ossoff and Warnock. How do I know? Because in the North and Metro Atlanta area, the very same people who voted for Joe Biden and David Perdue voted for either Loeffler or Collins. They didn't vote for Warnock. They didn't vote for Ossoff. To the extent they didn't vote for Collins and Loeffler, they voted for any one of the other 21 candidates other than Warnock. He's too far to the left. Every time he opens his mouth, he nearly chokes on the hammer and sickle on his tongue. And Jon Ossoff is just a trust fund socialist, singularly, spectacularly unaccomplished in life, other than he was able to get money from the Chinese Communist Party. Good for him. But y'all, I'm telling you, the Republicans got to get their head in the game here. This is a very winnable race, unless Republicans talk themselves out of winning. And right now, they're spending a lot of time talking themselves out of winning. You got to get past what happened in November and focus on January and save the Senate. Joe Biden wants a gun tax. Joe Biden wants an agriculture policy that would subsidize small farmers and minority communities, which sounds good, except they would punish corporate America that's feeding America in order to do it. This is not good. And the way to stop the policies, the way to stop the appointments is to hold the Senate, and you can do it. Republicans have the game in Georgia to be able to do it if they don't talk themselves out of it. And I can't believe the number of people who are emotionally invested in talking the GOP out of it. And part of me thinks that the reason they're doing this is because if Loeffler and Perdue do win in January, it would just be further proof that the race wasn't stolen from Donald Trump. He lost. And they can't, epistemically, they can't buy into that idea. So they got to make sure they throw away January to prove that, to maintain the fraud that the election was stolen. No, the race wasn't stolen. The president lost. Everyone else won. Fair and square. Let's go get the Senate from the Democrats and keep it Republican.